I wanted to take a little bit of time to reflect on how the year has gone so far so that I can start putting some plans in place for the rest of the year. It has been a very busy year for me so far, but overall a very positive one. Busy doesn't necessarily mean negative. There have been some very stressful moments, of course. As I always say, work is incredibly busy and that hasn't been great, but we did get married. I was going to say remarried because my husband and I were already married 2 years ago, but this year we planned and had our big wedding party where we invited all of our friends and some family members, and it was honestly an incredible day, but that took up the first half of the year basically, and then alongside that my husband broke his leg, which wasn't the best timing, but we got through it. And so for the rest of the year we have barely any plans and I'm going to have such a nice time. I'm really looking forward to having a bit of a slower second half of the year, but you're here to hear me talk about books, not about my personal life. So I thought today I would share with you just a couple of stats. I'm not going to go like too in depth, but also I wanted to share my favourites and least favourite books of each month of the year so far, not including July, because there have really been some standout books this year and I just love talking about them. I've mentioned them in several other videos before, so you may be sick of this, but I thought this was a new way to like kind of jig up the concept of sharing my favourite books of the year, because the ones that I've shared previously may not have been monthly, if that makes sense. So there's a good chance there are new books in here that I would like to talk about. So just for some quick reading stats, I'm not going to bore you with too many numbers. I'll do a separate video on that at the end of the year. I have read 61 books so far this year. This is including July. My slowest reading months have been January and June. January I was on holiday in Australia for 2 weeks, and June I was amping up for the wedding prep with the wedding prep. So that's why those 2 months were the slowest. My average rating is 3.55, which is about on par for me. My most popular genre that I have been reading is fantasy, which is incredible. Previously I've kind of dipped more into thrillers and contemporary, but now we're back on the fantasy train and I love it. I think that's why I have so many 5-star reads, because I've been reading some really good books. I do wish that my sci-fi reading had been a bit higher, so that's something that I would like to work on for the rest of the year, because I do really love my sci-fi reads, particularly sci-fi horror, and I've got 2 whole sci-fi shelves down there that I just haven't really dipped into this year. I've read a few, but not enough for my liking, so I'd like to see sci-fi climb a little bit more. I'm trying to see, yeah, it's one of my lowest read genres of the year so far, so I need to work on that and I would really like to. The majority of my reading has been 5 4.5 or 4-star reads. I've got 5 5-star reads, 4 4.5-star reads, and 26 4-star reads. That's incredible. The rest like don't matter. I've only DNF'd 4 or 3 books this year. I can't remember how many. I think my number is wrong. It says 3. I think I've DNF'd 4, which to me means that I'm picking out some really good books. And then here is my map of the world in case you're interested. I would really like to explore more of South America and Africa as usual. Those are always my least read continents. Central America as well. So that is something that I'd like to work on for the rest of the year. I have so many options on my shelves. I'm just not picking them up. So that's all for my statistics. I don't really want to go into loads of detail. As I said, I don't want to bore you. I'm really pleased with how most of those have gone, apart from the sci-fi thing. As I've said, I do expect that to increase as the year goes on. But I definitely want to stick to mainly reading fantasy over thriller and contemporary, because I am kind of over reading tons of thrillers in a year. I find that they have become a bit samey, which is really disappointing because at one point it was one of my favourite genres, but I think I've just burnt out. I've been picking up way too many and the publishers haven't really been focusing on like unique thrillers. I do have a few on my shelf that I would class as like unique that I would like to pick up. Unique in their concepts or written by marginalised authors, which again is not very common in the thriller genre. So that is something that I would like to continue exploring, but just not at the same rate as I had been before, because I think fantasy is definitely where my heart is. I'm really pleased with the pace of my reading. 61 books is a bit low for me at this point in the year, but to be honest, I don't really mind. I'm not really trying to reach a particular number. I'd like to get over 100 if possible, but I'm not too bothered if I don't. I think my highest was like 160 something, and that was absolutely fine with me as well. It didn't feel like too many, so anywhere between like 100, 160 would be okay. So now, without further ado, let's get into my favourite and least favourite books of each month. Starting with January. As I said, January was the month that I was in Australia for 2 weeks. So my reading was very, very slow. I only read 4 books, so I don't really have many books to choose from. So my favourite book of the month was Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez, and this I gave 4 stars. I didn't have a 5-star read in January. This book is about a couple who go on a first date and they fall for each other really, really quickly, but then they are very, very quickly separated again when the female main character, whose name I can't remember, has to move away to the opposite side of the country. And so they don't think they can do long distance, but they give it a fair go. Both characters are going through a lot in their personal lives and with their families. So the female main character, her mother has dementia, and so the whole family have moved back into the family home to help deal with her and sort of like share the load, I guess. But that's not really working out as well as they had hoped it would. And then the male main character, he is a vet who works with animals, not an army vet, and he is running his own successful practice, but he is trying to find ways to move over to the, I guess it's the West Coast, to be with the female main character, and it's just not working out, and they keep trying all these different things. In addition to that, he also has an abusive family, and he is coping with having grown up with that and how it has affected him in his adult life, and also being currently no contact with his parents, which is for the best, but they are trying to get back in touch with him and he really doesn't want to. I really love Abby Jimenez's romance books because they always include something a bit more deeper. It sounds a bit rude to say that other romance books don't include like deep topics, but there's always several layers to Abby Jimenez's books, and that's why she is probably my favourite romance author. They're always very, very emotional. They always kind of like kick you in the guts. This one wasn't my favourite of hers. I just feel like with the characters, they didn't spend enough time together for me, but also that was kind of the point of the whole plot, was that they were long distance and were struggling to see each other enough. So I kind of get that. It just wasn't my favourite dynamic. I also feel like the male main character's backstory could have been explored a little bit more. The stuff about his parents and how it was affecting him later in life, I feel like that could have been a bit more of a focus, because it felt like the focus was either the relationship, which is fair, or the female main character's mother and how the family were dealing with her condition. So the balance was kind of off. So that's why I didn't rate this one higher than a 4, but it was still an excellent book. And then my least favourite book of January was Quicksilver. I gave it 1 star. This is honestly one of the worst books I've ever read. This is about a woman who lives in a desert kind of society. In this city there are different kind of rings, I guess. There's like the centre where the more well-off people live, and she lives like several rings out where the poorer people live. At the beginning of the book, she is arrested for theft, and she is taken to the city centre, to the palace, to be kind of interrogated or tried. And then all of a sudden a portal opens up and this really handsome wet man comes out of the puddle that is formed on the floor and takes her over to another realm, the Fae realm. And then that's when she gets to know Kingfisher, who is a Fae. I hated this one. I thought the writing was awful. It included kind of modern phrases and sayings. For example, the main character mentioned cliff notes, like giving someone the cliff notes, which if you think about it doesn't make any sense. There's also modern slang used, and that doesn't always matter to me when I'm reading a fantasy book. Like, I don't really care if someone says like this sucks, but along with everything else, it was just too much for me. I don't know why everyone likes this book. It's honestly atrocious. I didn't like the romance. I found that Kingfisher was like overly grumpy. This isn't like a grumpy sunshine thing, it's just he is meant to be like a bad boy, but he was like too much on the wrong end of the scale for me. I didn't like it at all, and for some reason his hair was always wet, and that irritated me as well. I have been trying to recap this book for the last 6 months, and I can't bring myself to do it. I will do it. I think I'll do a video recap and a written recap, but I'm working on the written recap first, and that means I have to relive this entire thing, and I don't want to. So it's a bit delayed, but I will get there before the second book comes out. I think that's coming out in the autumn. And then moving on to February and better things. My favourite book of the month is one that I've spoken about at length. I haven't done a video review of this, but I am considering it. I also haven't done a written review because I have been terrible at those because of all the aforementioned things going on in my life up to now. But that book is The Immortality Thief. I gave this one 5 stars. I've told you so many times that you should read this. This is space horror, sci-fi horror, but it's also kind of like a thriller action adventure as well. So this follows a guy called Sean who is a linguist, and when he was younger, his whole planet or city on the planet was kind of destroyed by these things called ministers, which are kind of like alien type things, human-like aliens. Humanoid, I suppose you could say. And Sean and his friend have kind of led a life of crime out of necessity to get by, and they have both been arrested. And they are approached one day by someone who you know is well up in government, but this person sends someone as a representative to talk to Sean and his friend and one other person, I think, can't remember their name. They are asked to go to the spaceship that you can see here on the cover to collect some data. This data is super special. It's of the Philosopher's Stone experiments, which you find out more about as you read, so I won't go into detail of what they are. They are mentioned on the back, so I am allowed to tell you. This very important person has been putting together a crew to go over there, get the data, because this ship has been orbiting a star that is about to explode or implode, one of the two. The ship is about to be destroyed by this star, and so the crew have to go there, get the data and save it because it's really, really important data. So they arrive on this spaceship and it's not exactly as they expected. Sean meets some people there, the most important ones being Indigo and Lanternized, and it turns into kind of a little horror adventure there. There are awful creatures on the ship that are quite scary. There's a really kind of awful, horrific scene that I'm thinking of. There's a few actually, and the way that the author kind of builds the atmosphere and the tension is really, really well done. The thing I love most about this book is, first of all, Sean and his entire personality. I really think he is a very well written character who clearly has some trauma in his past that he's like trying to deflect from that and ignore it, but that doesn't go too well. He is dealing with a lot. There's also the found family dynamic, which I won't go into loads of detail on because it's really lovely to discover that for yourself. It's not something that I expected from a space horror book, but it's something that definitely happens. And I do have a ship in this. I cannot tell you how desperate I am for a third book so that I can see this ship hopefully come to fruition, because it's incredible. It's such a wonderful relationship and I could talk about it for hours, but I can't in this video because you'll click off for the amount of times that I have mentioned this book. Please read it, I adore it. Partly also for the linguistic and translation elements of the book and plot as well. It's very, very important to the plots, and I'm really interested in languages and linguistics myself, history of languages and things, and Sean is too. I love Sean. Sean is incredible. Read this book. I didn't read too many like bad or terrible books in February. I didn't have a 1-star read, but I did have a couple of 2 stars. And I think the one that I would count as my least favourite would be Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, just because of the sheer disappointment I felt when I realised I'm not enjoying this book. So this book follows a professor called Emily who comes from the UK, England, and she is putting together an encyclopedia about fairies, and she travels to the Nordics, to a very secluded, isolated village, because she has heard that their fairies are very interesting and she wants to study them. And she isn't welcomed by the village very much because she doesn't really put herself out there. She's not the friendliest person. She's very, very closed off and awkward in social situations. She also has a guy who she knows from back home who follows her to this village, and he kind of wants to help her, but they have some sort of like weird relationship thing going on. She doesn't like him for various reasons, and I'm still not really sure what those reasons are. She never really gives a good reason for not liking him. I just found this book to be very pretentious in some ways. It reminded me a lot of A Natural History of Dragons in the way that it's written in diary format as the main character is studying creatures. And I didn't like that book either. It was far too slow paced for me, and so was this one. So I couldn't really get into it. Even when the plot picked up towards the end, I still thought it was really slow. And it's just not the kind of book that I enjoy. I was really disappointed. I still am. I really wanted to like it, but I didn't. On to March. This was another slower reading month. I read 5 books this month, and I had 1 5-star read, and that was The Bridge Kingdom. So I've spoken about this one at length as well, but I really want everyone to read it. I feel like even though this book is quite popular, and L Jensen is a popular author, I don't think enough people are reading this book. This book is the first in the Bridge Kingdom series. The first 2 books in the series are a duology. They're following a couple called Lara and Aaron. Lara comes from a desert kingdom, and she is being married off to Aaron, who is the king of the Bridge Kingdom. Lara's father wants Lara to infiltrate the Bridge Kingdom and kind of take them down, because the bridge is apparently all-controlling. It connects the North and South continents, and so the Bridge Kingdom controls the trade, and Lara's father doesn't like this. He thinks that they're oppressing their people. So Lara goes in to marry Aaron with the full intention of like dobbing him in and taking over the Bridge Kingdom and spilling all their secrets. So she spends a lot of the book kind of trying to figure out the secrets and how to infiltrate the bridge. I think my only criticism of this is that we don't actually learn any of the bridge secrets ourselves. We see Lara kind of investigating and marking things to show people like where to enter the bridge and stuff, but it's not really described very well, and so the bridge to me still feels like a massive mystery, and I think that's probably the intent of the author, but I wanted to learn these bridge secrets and I didn't. So this book, for being quite a short fantasy book, is very gripping, and the author manages to build the tension in an incredible way, so much so that I actually felt sick while I was reading the last like 150 pages because I knew something bad was coming. Like, you do just know. And there was a stone in the pit of my stomach as I was reading because I just knew everything was going to go wrong, and the author did it in such a brilliant way that I honestly wanted to cry throughout the second half of this book because I was so distraught for the characters and what was going to come. So I gave this book 5 stars for the tension, for the characters, for the ship. I adore Lara and Aaron so much. I've reread this in order to recap it, and it's just brilliant. I also read the second book, which I gave 4.5 stars. Not quite as incredible as the first book because it lacked that kind of tension, but it was still really, really good. So I'd highly recommend this series, at least this duology. If you want to stop after the Traitor Queen, then you should, and you can. But these first 2 books are honestly almost flawless. My lowest rated book in March, I gave 3 stars, so it wasn't a bad book, but I don't have anything else to mention as my least favourite, so that was Sunrise on the Reaping. I think I'm just kind of over these prequel stories in the Hunger Games trilogy. I don't really feel like they're offering anything that the original trilogy didn't. It was really interesting to kind of explore Haymitch's character and his background. I feel like it could have maybe been a novella instead. I don't really feel like we needed to see the actual games or anything because we know how those are going to go. There's going to be one victor until there wasn't in the Hunger Games. So I don't really have loads to say about this. I gave it 3 stars. It was very, very average. Yeah, it was just okay. Moving on to April, my 5-star read was The Unkillable Princess. This is the sequel to The Immortality Thief, book 2, and currently the last book that has been published. I gave this one 5 stars. I was considering giving it 4.5 because I didn't love it as much as The Immortality Thief because it lacks the space horror element. This one is more of a heist story. It follows Sean and his found family as they go on a mission to retrieve something, and I'm not going to go into any detail about who is asking them to retrieve it or what it is that they're going to retrieve because I think you should read this for yourself, and also it kind of spoils some of The Immortality Thief if I go into those details, so I won't. This one has amazing found family vibes, and that's the reason I gave this one 5 stars. It was also really, really well written. It was action-packed, really brutal in some places as well, just like the first book was, and it ends on a massive cliffhanger. At least I think it's massive. It tore me apart a bit, let's say. So I would really, really like people to pick up this duology so that we can get book 3, please. And then my least favourite book of this month was Orbital. I gave this one 2 stars, but really it's probably more of a 1 star. It's such a short book, and it has been nominated for many literary awards and also sci-fi awards, but I really wouldn't say this one is science fiction at all. It's literary fiction with sciencey elements. It's awful, it's boring. This follows a crew of, I think it's the International Space Station, or it could just be like a random space station, but I'm fairly sure it's the ISS, as they are on the ship orbiting the Earth, and they look down on Earth and just reflect on their lives or things that are happening on Earth. And it is so boring. I didn't feel connected to any of these characters. They had 0 personality apart from problems, and for such a short book I was just ready for it to end. It was so boring. I tried listening to the audiobook, I tried reading it physically, and I just could not enjoy it. I tried so hard because it has won many awards, but I just didn't like it. Moving on to May, I gave Lore Olympus 5 stars this month, or that month, and I loved it. So this is obviously the 8th, have I said that already? This is the 8th volume of Lore Olympus. It's a graphic novel series about Hades and Persephone. It's a retelling. This one, without going into spoilers, follows the court case and the aftermath of it, which is the point at which I stopped reading the webcomics and decided to wait for the physical editions to come out. And I love the entire courtroom drama and everything leading up to it and what happens afterwards. One of my favourite characters is also introduced here. I think you can tell by the cover that Hades and Persephone get separated in some way. I won't go into spoilers. It's one of my favourite tropes in long series where the characters get separated and they're just desperate to get back to each other. So I really enjoyed that in this one, and I'm really looking forward to the release of the next volume because I think that's where it starts to get to the point where I don't know what's happening because I didn't carry on reading the web comics. I think there's probably like a few parts that I have already read, but for the most part it's all going to be new content for me. I love this volume, I love this series, I love Hades and Persephone and a lot of the side characters. Some of them I absolutely hate, but a lot of them I do really, really enjoy. So I'm looking forward to carrying on with this series. And again, in May, I didn't rate anything below a 3. So they're all kind of books that I enjoyed. My least favourite book of the month has to be A Fate Inked in Blood by Daniel L Jensen, the author of The Bridge Kingdom. This is because I was so hyped for this book because it's Norse mythology inspired. It's fantasy. It supposedly had a really good ship. It didn't. And I love the Bridge Kingdom book, so I was excited to explore something else from this author, but I honestly wish I hadn't. I've given it 3 stars, and I think that's out of like respect for the author because I do love her other series so much, but this one was just not good. The main character made really stupid decisions. She had no personality apart from being clumsy and making the wrong decision. The love interest was boring. The entire thing was predictable. I knew where it was going to go at the end. By like the 100-page mark, I knew the twists, and not in like a good build-up of tension way like I did with the Bridge Kingdom. That wasn't really a twist, that was more of like an overwhelming dread, whereas this was just, it was meant to be a twist at the end and it was not good. So I was really disappointed in that. I'm really sad that this happened. I only gave this one 3 stars. It's probably more of a 2, but as I said, I do respect the author, so I'm giving this a 3 out of like loyalty, but I'm not going to carry on with this series. I didn't enjoy the first book. And then finally we're moving on to June. As I said, this was also a slower reading month. I only read 4 books, but we did have a variety of ratings. I gave 1 book a 5, 1 book a 4, 1 book a 3.5 and 1 book a 2. So the book that I gave 5 stars, and therefore it's my favourite book of the month, was Daughter of No Wilds. This is by Broadbent, who I'm pointing down here, her name's up here, who you may know from The Serpent and the Wings of Night. This was the trilogy that she published first, and I loved this book. As I said, I gave it 5 stars. It was kind of bordering on 4.5, but then I couldn't think of anything wrong with it. I didn't dislike anything about this book. So this follows a person called Tysana, who is enslaved as a teenager or child and taken away from her home. We think her entire family are killed. We're not sure if any survived, and she is forced to serve this man until in the first like 50 or so pages she saves up enough when she's like in her early 20s, I think, to be able to buy her freedom. This guy has given her an amount that she had to save, and she was able to do so. And so she presents it to him and she's like, I'm ready to be free now, so here's your money, let me go. And he completely kicks off and tries to kill her because he didn't think she would ever be able to save that much. And he obviously doesn't want to lose who he feels like is his best girl. So he tries to kill her, she kills him instead, and then she is forced to flee, and she is therefore forced to leave her friends behind, her fellow people who are also enslaved or were also enslaved by this guy. She needs to leave them, and she's not sure what has happened to them after she flees. Because she is a magic wielder herself, she is determined to join the Order of Magic Wielders so that she can really hone her craft and learn how to use her magic to go back to save her friends who she has left behind, and also just kind of do good in the world anyway. So she goes to join the Order. She is told that she has kind of joined it a little bit too late because normally you join the Order when you're a child, and she's an adult. Eventually they agree to let her join, and she is apprenticed to a really grumpy guy called Max. The two of them start to fall for each other. That's where the romance comes into this fantasy romance. And so he starts to train her to wield her magic, know what she's doing, pass the tests that the Order are going to put on her. And that's just the first, like, I guess 200 pages of the book. More things happen. Halfway through this book there is a massive shift. I won't say what it is because it would definitely be spoilery. I was just thinking that it definitely would. There's a massive shift, and at some point we get Max's point of view introduced, which I thought was a really interesting way of doing it because you don't see anything from Max after the prologue. For a good few hundred pages you don't really get into his head, and then you slowly start to learn more about him and what he's thinking, why he is being so grumpy, why he is the way he is, and it all kind of aligns with what's going on with the main character Tysana as well. So it's all really interesting. I honestly adored it. I'm currently reading the second book, although I've put it on pause, so I need to go back to it and restart it just for the like true experience. I had to stop reading it in June because there was too much going on. I love this book, I love this ship, I am really happy with how it's progressing as a series so far, and I can't wait to continue. And then finally we have my least favourite book of June, and that was Ledge. This is another fantasy romance book. It's about a woman whose name I can't remember, who grew up on the ledge of a mountain. She couldn't climb the mountain because it was like a sheer cliff face, and she couldn't go the other way because it was just like a sheer drop into a glacier. So her and her people are kind of left there, and through the generations each year several people are grabbed by these creatures, winged creatures with claws, and they're called the Glacians. And so the main character at the beginning of the book is one of the people who are grabbed in this like annual event, and she meets a hot half Glacian guy, and then the two have to try to figure out how to flee the mountain. I didn't like this book. I thought the world building was terrible in that it was just so unoriginal, so badly explained, so badly written that I just did not enjoy it. It was very predictable. I didn't like the ship either. I thought this whole like Glacian human thing was weird. I know that like they had like human features and things, but I couldn't get over the fact that he was a different species. That doesn't matter to some people, you might still enjoy it, but it mattered to me in this one specifically, in this book specifically, because it wasn't well written. I have read Ice Planet Barbarians and I didn't mind it there, but for some reason I could not get on board with it here. I couldn't get into it. So I didn't like this book. I gave it 2 stars, and it was my worst book of June. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you weren't too bored because I have mentioned all of these books in the past for the most part. I just thought it would be a really good way to reflect on the year so far, tell you what my favourite and least favourite books are, so you know which books you should be buying or avoiding. Let me know what your favourite books of the year have been so far down in the comments below, and I'll be back soon with another video. Bye.